Today, we're going to be talking about a subject I've wanted to do a long video on for such a long time, and that's green-brown duochromes. This is what I would consider to be one of the most flattering types of shifts. It's something classic, timeless, everyday friendly, and just a perfect neutrals with a twist. I've got lots of options here from all different brands in all different textures and formulas. And we are going to swatch them in detail and try all of the shades on. And we are going to full on nerd out over these duochromes. Something I love about this is that despite having a bunch of similarities, there are some very distinct differences between these shades. All of these brands I've talked about before, and we've got some great formulas, so let's go ahead and get into it. If I have a savings code with a brand, I'll share it on the screen, and all products will be linked. Starting off with a single shadow from Beauty Creations, this is called Outta. I've talked about these single shadows from Beauty Creations many times on my channel because the quality is so good and the price is so incredibly affordable. I really do like to think of these shadows as an affordable luxury. Outta is definitely one of my favorite single shadows from Beauty Creation because it has this beautiful shift. It's got a light brown base with a hint of pinky red, and it's got this ethereal light green golden shift. The single shadows from Beauty Creations don't have any squish to them. They're definitely a texture I think will work for a variety of skin types in terms of no creasing, and you do get a fair amount of sparkle with these shades. The acrylic packaging on these also just gives you a kind of elevated experience overall. Okay, next shade we have is from ColourPop, and this is Rooftop Cocktails. This is a classic shade, and it's definitely one that I've had a lot of people tell me is a favorite of theirs. This is a super shock shadow, and it has that cream to powder finish. It almost feels like a little bit squishy in the pan, but this is a very interesting texture. I feel like it's a texture that really does work for a lot of people. Now, the ColourPop shades are not the most high impact ones that I'm showing, and they definitely do vary shade to shade with how high intensity they are, but this one really does have a beautiful sparkle to it and just a really pretty glow that I've come to love. As you can see, this shade does have a fair bit of warmth to it. I would say this is a grungy version of a green brown duochrome. Really enjoy this shade and definitely a classic for a reason. Okay, next shade we have is one of my favorites in this category, and this is from Enko Beauty. Many of you may not have heard of Enko, but they're a very cool kind of small indie brand, and they have a beautiful selection of single shadows that come in this acrylic packaging. Now, the texture of this shade is incredibly high impact. You can see how much pigment you get even on the first swipe. It is part of why I really love this shade. You can see you get some sparkle in it. It's not a fine sparkle. The sparkle particles are maybe just a little bit larger, but not chunky in any kind of way. The pigment is a little bit softer, but it's not squishy. That softer texture is what allows it to be a little bit more high impact, high pigment. It has a reddish brown base and a beautiful kind of cool toned green shift to it. This is one of their most popular shades. Okay, the next shade we have is from Half Magic Beauty, and this is Swamp Goddess, and this is one of their duochrome eyeshadows. This shade is probably one of the grungiest that I'm going to show. It does have some brown in its base, but it has a very strong grungy golden green shift. Now, as you can see, there is some squish factor when you press into the pan with some of the Half Magic single shadows. I personally don't experience creasing with this formula, but it is something to keep in mind. With the Half Magic shades, you can build up the pigment with layering it up a little bit, or you can wear it more sheerly if you want. You get a nice sparkle in these shades. The sparkle is a little bit smaller. For a mainstream brand, the price is about what I would expect. These retail for $15. I think at one point they were $14. Half Magic has some of my favorite sparkly products for a mainstream brand. Okay, next shade I have is a new favorite of mine, and this is from Terra Moons. It's the shade M42. This came out actually within the last month, and this is a very sparkly green-brown duochrome, and I would say this is probably my favorite texture from Terra Moons at the moment. Something I really enjoy about their shadows is that they really do play around with texture. They've got a nice variety, and this kind of shade has really got that refined sparkle, no squish in the pan, high impact and shifty. This version of green brown duochrome I would say is probably on the neutral to maybe slightly cooler toned side. It's very light and ethereal. I was super happy to see this shade included in the last release. Okay, I have a second shade from Terra Moons, and this is called Astrophel. I believe this came out sometime last year. Now, I do want to preface this by saying this shade definitely has some pink in its base. It's definitely not as brown. It does look like it has some, and when you swatch it, you can see that it still has a kind of neutral leaning base. And it's got quite a strong, cool-toned green shift. It has a hint of aqua. The texture of this shade is very similar to M42. Lots of sparkle, no squish in the pan, and lots of impact even on the first swipe. And this is definitely a shade that I haven't heard too many people talking about. I would consider it to be an underrated single shadow from Terra Moons. If you enjoy this shift, I do think that you would enjoy this shade as well, acknowledging that it does have a bit more pink in its base, but it's not a bright pink. Okay, now I have a couple of options from Clionadh, and Clionadh also makes some of my favorite single shadows. They have such a wide variety of shades, and something I've really come to appreciate is that they don't tend to discontinue their shades, which is not something you can say about most brands, even mainstream brands. This is the shade Vineyard, and this is a very grungy version of a green-brown duochrome. It's quite warm-toned. You've got a kind of golden green shift. The sparkle in it is quite fine. You have a fair amount of impact on the first swipe. I also want to mention this is an Earth Vibrant, and this is a category from Clionadh that I think is one of their most unique. In this range, they include a lot of neutrals with a twist. If you had liked the Half Magic but were looking for a version that's not as squishy, I think this is a really good option. Okay, and we have a second option from Clionadh. This is called Vault. Vault is considered a glitter vibrant type shadow. So as the name implies, you have a fair amount of sparkle and you also have a prominent shift. Now this version of green brown duochrome I would say is much cooler toned than the last shade that I showed. For some of these cooler toned versions, you have more of kind of like an aqua shift than a gold green shift. Really pretty kind of light ethereal version of this shade. It's not as high impact as a few of the other versions that I've shown, but it's very beautiful and it has a refined sparkle that I think a lot of people will get on well with. In general, I feel like Clionadh has a good variety in textures, especially ones that I think do work for a wide range of skin types. Okay, next we have a single shadow from Touch of Glam Beauty. Touch of Glam is another brand I've talked about on my channel several times before. They make some absolutely stunning single shadows. I would say of all of the indie brands that I talk about, I feel like the shades from Touch of Glam are probably the highest impact. You get a lot of pigment when you dip your finger into the pan. They really excel at making grungy shadows and neutrals with a twist. This is the shade Koosh Era, and as you can see, it has a brown base and a kind of grungy golden with just a hint of green shift. If you are someone that prefers gold and maybe doesn't love green as much or just likes a hint of green, this is a great option, and it's definitely different than all the other shades that I've shown. The texture and impact that you get with Touch of Glam, it truly is special. Next, we have another shade from ColourPop, and this is actually one of their liquid shadows. I don't believe they have too many shades in this range. This is called See You Later, and this is probably the greenest shade that I'm including, but as you can see, when I'm swatching it, you definitely do have some brown in its base. You don't get a ton of sparkle with these shades, but they do have a very pretty glow with a lot of liquid shadows depending on their opacity and the way they apply. I like to use a lot of the shades as topper shades. So that is what I did in this case. I decided to layer it over a brown shadow just to bring out that green-brown shift even more. In general, I really do think that ColourPop makes some solid, affordable chrome shadows, and I tend to always look forward to seeing what they add to their range. I've had mine for a fair bit of time, so it is drying a little bit, but it still works. Just something I wanted to mention. Okay, the last few shades I'm going to talk about are from palettes, and the first is a palette from Viseart. This is the Kashmiri Charmeuse palette. This came out a few years ago. I've talked about Viseart quite a number of times on my channel. I feel as though their shimmer formula has really stepped up in the last couple of years. This is a prime example. Look at how beautiful this shade is. It is crazy. When Viseart does a duochrome well, they really do it well. Now, I know I'm talking about the palette as a whole, and what I love about Viseart palettes is that you get a fantastic matte formula, and with the improving shimmer quality, it really is the full package. I would describe this shade as having a reddish brown base and a strong teal leaning shift. Okay, and when I was doing my research for this video, this palette was mentioned as having a beautiful green-brown duochrome, and I'm so glad to have discovered this. This is an oldie but a goodie 9-pan palette from ColourPop as part of their kind of monochromatic series, and these are definitely some of my favorite palettes from ColourPop. Look at how gorgeous this shade is. It does remind me of the one in the Viseart palette. I don't think it has quite as much punch in my opinion, but it's still beautiful. You don't get a ton of sparkle with this one, but it does have a beautiful shine and shift. And if you enjoy green palettes, I feel like the color story with Sage the Day is also quite pretty. I'm happy to have discovered this because ColourPop has several versions of this kind of shade, but in all different formats. I would describe the green in the shade to actually appear sage. Next, we have a palette from Ismaya. This is their Core 2.0 palette. I still want to call it the Industrial 2 palette, but it's no longer called that. This is my own personal favorite palette from Ismaya. I think you get a great assortment of shimmers in here. And the version of this duochrome has kind of a light ethereal base. I would describe this as more of a reddish taupe base, and it has a sort of light green-blue shift. You do get a little bit of squish in the pan, so it's something to keep in mind if you don't get on well with shimmers like that. It's not bad though, and look how much shine and sparkle you get with this one. Now, obviously, this is a very pricey palette. I obviously wouldn't recommend getting the palette for the shade, but in my opinion, you do get a beautiful assortment of special shades in this palette, and I'm happy that this kind of duochrome was included in the palette. Okay, last but not least, we have a palette from REM Beauty. This is one of their new eyeshadow quads. This is called the Earth Fairy Quad. I did a long form video dedicated to these palettes. I absolutely love them. Definitely one of my favorite releases from REM Beauty. The quality of the mattes and shimmers is so nice. In each palette, you do get a variety of textures. This is quite a grungy shade. You have a brown base and you have a green gold shift. The green that you have in it is not as strong as some of the green in other shades, and if you like that, then this could be a good version. This particular shade I would describe as having high impact, a lot of pigment even on the first swipe, and a slightly larger particle size. Here is what all of the shades I just talked about look like swatched on my arm. I gotta say, I have really looked forward to making this video. I find it so fun and interesting that even in looking at one specific type of shift, you can have such a wide variety. And I know that there's probably so many other versions of this shade out there. Let me know in the comments which were your favorites. And also let me know in the comments which other shades like this you have tried, especially if you think that there's a version that I should try or that others might like. This is part of the fun of nerding out over sparkly eyeshadows. As always, I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.